Good whenever, Prospect Harbor United Methodist Church. Thank you for hanging in there through this difficult COVID season. Things are looking better and brighter. I'm hearing from more and more people who are getting their vaccinations and feeling good afterwards. I've had mine. Uh, I'm back from a restful, not trip to Missouri to see the grandkids, and it was wonderful. When we got back, we both tested negative for COVID, so we were able to continue, but we are still being safe. Our goal is to be open for Palm Sunday, which is just a month away. We'll plan a spring cleanup of the church and grounds before that. We'll take all precautions necessary, but I hope you put it on your calendar, and I hope you start to think about being back in the church sanctuary. It will be wonderful. That's last Sunday in March, I believe, because Easter is April 7th. You might need to check your calendar. I might be wrong. We'll have communion mid-March, near the end of Lent. Mark and Nita delivered to you some goodie bags that should have had a few extra communion cups in there. So I'll send out plenty of notice about a Zoom invite for communion for one of the services. Also, I've been doing Lenten devotions every morning about 8 o'clock on Facebook. Sometimes I post them a little earlier. Check those out. I'm only doing them Monday through Friday, so you won't find one for Saturday or Sunday. And once again, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Nita. Thank you, everybody who is continuing to carry on the work of the church, continuing to be the hands and feet of Christ as we go through this, continuing to love others as you love your Lord. I miss seeing you, and it's just around the corner. Hang in there. Goodbye, church.
Mark, chapter 4. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him."
Good whenever. We all face obstacles throughout our lives, and many times we allow these obstacles to define us and overtake us. However, if we can learn to use these obstacles, these bad things that have happened to us, to our advantage, they can become leverage rather than downfall. Mark Batterson's book, Win the Day, is the basis for the sermon series. And today is habit number 2, which is called Kiss the Wave. You need to learn, Mark says, to kiss the wave that throws you against the rock of ages. By doing so, you will find strength through life's storms. We always have a choice in life. And that choice is this: we can either let obstacles destroy us, overtake us, and knock us down, or we can use them to our advantage. This reminds me of something that Brady said to his mother when we were still going through the adoption process and trying to become a family of 3. And he'd say to Jill, he said, "You know, Mom, if I hadn't gotten in trouble at my last foster home and I hadn't been sent to this residential treatment facility where I met you as my counselor, and if you hadn't dared me to get my levels up with a reward of an evening at Cece's Pizza, which is an all-you-can-eat pizza smorgasbord in Missouri that also has a huge arcade," which I think was the real attraction. And when he said, if you hadn't done all that, or if he hadn't done all that, if he hadn't acted out early on, he wouldn't be in the situation he's in today. Now, that situation, according to him, was finding his way into a loving family. And I don't know how much weight I'm going to give to his logic in that, but he did start to realize that we need to make choices, and those choices affect where we're going. We can choose to be victorious despite tragedy and pain. Mark Batterson had this to say about the choices we make regarding our obstacles. You may not be responsible for the difficulties you've had to endure, but you are responsible. So we might not be responsible for what happened to us, but we are able to respond. We are responsible. One of the things I really like about Mark Batterson is his play on words and his juxtaposition of light and dark and reason and fantasy and words that he wakes us up to that are new. So are you able to respond to your obstacles? He goes on to say this: the obstacles we encounter are not the enemy. The enemy, more often than not, is us. The obstacle, believe it or not, is the way, which leads us to what Charles Spurgeon wrote about: he has learned to kiss the wave that throws him up against the rock of ages. Choosing to not let the obstacles or the waves of life destroy you is in no way denying that those waves exist. We must not ignore the bad things that happen, but we need to accept them. But we do not have to let them overtake us. Instead, we can make the decision to find purpose in pain and strength through tragedy. In Mark's gospel this morning, we find the account of when Jesus calmed the storm. The disciples panicked when faced with the wind and the waves, but Jesus, he reacted very differently. Rather than becoming fearful, Jesus merely said, "Peace, be still." After the storm calmed, Jesus asked his disciples, Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? In this account, Jesus challenged his disciples to kiss the wave and embrace their own courage and fear through the storm. He assured them that they had a choice to make. They could either panic and be afraid, or they could have faith and trust him. Oftentimes, don't we find ourselves in this same fork in the road when we encounter obstacles? Jesus asks us, why are you still afraid? Have you still no faith? Often when we go through seasons of suffering or pain, we're eager to get out of those situations. Sometimes we focus so hard in getting through them that we forget to grow through them. It's often beneficial to look for the lesson in the middle of our suffering season and ask God, what are you trying to teach me through this? I've shared part of this story with you before. It was a time when our son Brady had been accused of some horrendous crimes by his cousin. They were both the same age when all these accusations were flying around, and the parents on both sides immediately rushed to protect their children, and Jill and I became alienated from the rest of her family. After horrible months, our lawyer was finally able to depose Brady's accuser, and during that deposition, that accuser admitted to making it all up. That day, Brady went free. He went free from the shackles of a false accusation. He went free from the shackles of doubt and worry and fear for his life. About a week later, I was cutting the grass on a Sunday morning in the summer, and I got a phone call, and it was from Brady's lawyer. And the question was this: the prosecuting attorney is willing to expunge Brady's record, wipe it clean. But he wants to know before he does that, do you want to press charges against his accuser for falsely accusing him? That was a tough decision. We've been through, pardon the language, we've been through hell. We didn't know how we were going to get out. Finally, the truth and the light came out, and we were sensing freedom. And now we were subjected to this decision to make. Do we want to prosecute in return? I think I made about 25 passes with the lawnmower before I stopped and shut it off and wiped my brow and said, no. What's done is done. Good, bad, or indifferent. Here's how I made the decision before I went in and told Jill what I thought we should do, and she was in full agreement. Here's what caused me to decide. I remembered the pain that Jill and I went through. I did not want another parent to go through that pain. By prosecuting this young person who had made these accusations, we would be subjecting their family to go through the same kind of pain we had gone through. As soon as I shut off the lawnmower and I yelled out loud, no, I felt awash with relief. I felt awash with grace. I felt awash with peace. I think every tense muscle in my body relaxed, and I became a simmering, heaping pile of sobs. I know that's hard to imagine. We went through suffering, and we learned through suffering. We had asked God, what are you trying to teach me through this? It's through this kind of introspective process that we begin to grow through suffering, rather than allowing the suffering to diminish us, to diminish our faith. Sometimes God delivers us from suffering. More often than not, he delivers us through it. What this means is that we can find purpose through our suffering by discovering ways to not only help ourselves, but to help others as well. Have you ever noticed that through suffering, excuse me, have you ever noticed that through suffering, you learn to better relate to the suffering of others? I shared this before when I talked about Henry Nouwen and the wounded healer, how we're much better to listen and to serve others when we can have true empathy and sympathy, when we've gone through it before. When we grieve the loss of a loved one, we're able to better understand the emotions and pain that someone else feels. When we grieve the same loss, we understand. When we find stress and frustration through economic trials, we're able to relate to someone else who experiences these same anxieties. It is not for nothing that we go through suffering. We condition ourselves for making decisions and for moving ahead in the path we've chosen. I shared with you that these neurological pathways that make connections within us are strengthened when we repeat good habits. Much like Pavlov's dog, who he found would salivate when he conditioned or connected the ringing of a bell with the arrival of food. So can suffering be like the bell for us. It can remind us of what a powerful God we have. It can remind us of the suffering that Christ went through. It can remind us that we got through that suffering. And did we grow? Did we become better versions of ourselves? Did we become better wounded healers for our family, for our friends, for our community? God can certainly heal us of past trauma and pain. And through that season of suffering, allow us to grow healthy attributes along the way. What you do, what I do, what we do with this newfound healing is very important. It's not enough to simply be healed by the divine power of God. We must form new, healthy habits to replace the old, unhealthy coping and defense mechanisms that held us back. Otherwise, you fall right back where you were, or worse. I invite you to learn to kiss that wave that throws you up against the rock of ages. I invite you to remember that Christ is walking with you. I invite you to remember that there isn't a single thing that has happened to you or will happen to you that God is not acutely aware of. We can all learn to kiss the wave. We can all become better for it. Have a wonderful, wonderful week as I wave to you goodbye. Amen.